Welcome to the fifth video in a series honoring the memory of my late wife, Esther Kaufman Forsen, who died on January 16, 2013. The first video in the series focuses on her early childhood years growing up in Eretz Yisrael, or the land of Israel. The second video focuses on the time spanning her teenage years and later growing up to be a beautiful young woman. The third video focuses on the family values Esther inherited from her parents. The fourth video steps back in time to illuminate Esther's family achievements and covers the early career of Esther's father, Richard Kaufman, a pioneering architect and town planner. This video is a second on Esther's heritage, again focusing on the achievements of Esther's father, particularly as a planner of multiple Jewish settlements in Eretz Israel. Here you see a portrait of Esther's father taken in 1922 by the photographer Hess, a little over a year after being invited by Arthur Rupin, an important Zionist land agent responsible for the purchase of large tracts of land, to come to Palestine to lead the physical construction of the Jewish settlements. Kaufman was very productive in his first years in Palestine. Eventually, the occupants of over 120 kibbutzim and moshavim and garden suburbs owe the design of their habitat to him. He was not only productive, he was innovative, as shown in the previous video that described the origins and development of Nahalau, the first moshav ovdim, or workers' moshav, that has gained worldwide notoriety and is in the curriculum of town planning in many universities. We will see in this video additional settlements and hear more about Kaufman's approach to planning. This video will focus on Richard Kaufman's work as a town planner. As mentioned before, he designed more than 120 kibbutzim, moshavim, and garden suburbs. The following quote is from an article in the Jerusalem Post Friday magazine titled "The Grand Designs of Richard Kaufman" by Abraham Rabinovich, dated April 1, 1983. To quote, "In this country, it is impossible to do your planning at a work table," said Kaufman in 1936. "Someone like me, who has built 120 sites, has to go out again for the 121st to see the land and the people." At the risk of sounding mystical, I must say that the decisive inspiration, much more important than experience, comes to me each time from contact with the ground on which I will build and with the people for whom I'm building." End quote. This bonding with the landscape and with the needs and aspirations of the people gave Kaufman the inspiration for his planning. But in addition, he had to make something concrete. Namely, he had to produce an actual plan for the layout of the streets, the location and size of the residences, the farmland plots, the central common buildings, etc. He had to put this down on paper so that it could be used. But also, he had to show the people for whom this was being done what they would be getting, and to do it in a convincing and artistic way. Thus, Kaufman's artistic talents were also put to work here. This photograph shows Kaufman in his studio putting some finishing touches on the plan of the small Mosheva Nurim. But who better than Esther to describe in her own words and voice how she watched her father create a town on top of a topographic map of the area.
I remember watching Father as he put one of his creations onto a large, long and wide blueprint with the topography of the hilly area on it. The blueprint was stacked onto a large board the size of a wide door, which was leaning against the wall, separating Abba's office from the larger room. With flowing arm movements, green areas, roads, and much more appeared on the base topography map. A city was being created. It was fascinating and awe-inspiring. And I asked Father, as his hand flowed in a graceful curve, creating a road, "How do you do it, Abba?" And he explained to me that there is a maximum and an ideal grade for a road in a mountainous area, and showed me by measuring the distance versus the rise in elevation in several areas on the road he had just drawn. I said, "But you didn't measure. It seemed to flow out of you. How do you do it?" He answered, "I don't know. I think it is music." How lucky I was to be witness to a symphony being created.
McDowell, on the Lake of Tiberias, also known as the Sea of Galilee, was designed by Richard Kaufman, Esther's father. The plate that you see is an illustration from the article Planning of Jewish Settlements, written by Kaufman and published in the Town Planning Review in November 1926. The full article can be found at www.richardkaufman.com. In the article, Kaufman describes the design as follows, quote, "The ground of this settlement lies on both sides of the high road from Tiberias to Safed, in the valley extending south and east from the present farm McDowell to the lake of Tiberias. High mountains bound it to the south, west, and north. Towards the east, the mountains open onto the lake like an amphitheater. The kernel of the settlement, with its residences, bazaar, marketplace, and public buildings, lies in the heart of this gorge on either side of the main traffic artery, the Tiberias-Safed Road, whence radio streets communicate with all parts of the settlement. Ring-shaped streets connect the various parts together and throw into rhythmical relief, yet again, the land basin and the amphitheater of mountains. The backbone of the countryside is provided by a long and wide avenue, cutting through the settlement somewhere in the center. This avenue branches off in the middle into two arms, one leading directly to the lake, where it terminates in a landing and bathing stage on a broad promenade, while the other arm, in the form of a tree-lined avenue, joins together the two wooded regions and continues to the sports ground and the northern parts of the settlement." Unquote. McDowell is well known today in Christian history as the birthplace of Mary Magdalena, a person reputed to be a follower of Jesus Christ, who spent much time at the Sea of Galilee. It has been recently speculated that she was actually married to him. In any case, McDowell today is an active Christian tourist site with numerous bed and breakfast houses offering accommodations to those seeking to step foot in the waters where Christ is said to have performed the miracle of the multiplication of the loaves and fishes. McDowell is a major stop on various pilgrimage and Holy Land tours. This photo is a composite of a low-resolution picture of the Memorial Pavilion built in Kfar Yehoshua, an agricultural settlement designed by Richard Kaufman, and superimposed on it a photograph of the mosaic inlay in the floor of the pavilion showing a likeness of his face. The ceremony was held in April 2004, and Esther attended. She also wrote a tribute to her father and had it translated to Hebrew for reading at the dedication by Eli Shamir, a painter who also studied at the Bezalel Academy and was conducting the ceremony. He happens to be a native of Kfar Yehoshua and provided some history about it. To quote from his article, "All Roads Lead to Kfar Yehoshua," in the following essay, I wish to clarify the origins and the vision that are embedded in some aspects of planning the public areas in Kfar Yehoshua, which is situated in the western part of Yezreel Valley. I suppose it is likely that any creation, even the most revolutionary and innovative one, is based in some way or connected in some way to the history of art and architecture. Every change is necessarily based on the tradition against which it is rebelling, and every plan somehow needs to be legitimized for the historic past as well as for the intentions and the realities of the present and the future. The idea of a garden city was conceived by Avigdor Howard of Britain in 1898 in response to the extensive urbanization of the City of London, which, according to him, caused urban pollution, poverty, and the emptying of the rural areas. Kaufman wrote, "Concerning our country, one cannot imagine any form of settlement more suitable than this, from the practical as well as the social, socialistic, health, ethical, and artistic point of view." In his plans, Kaufman tried to combine the idea of the Garden City with the Zionist socialist worldview. The return to nature promoted by Howard could have been connected to the rebirth of the Jewish people through cultivation of the soil. Kaufman even set his aspirations further than that by means of his plans, and without them noticing, he influenced the Yezreel Valley settlers to have the chance for a better quality of life and leisure time, activities long before these subjects were on the Zionist socialist agenda. Members of the Kfar Yehoshua who knew Nahalal very well were well aware of it, and therefore preserved in their insistence that the communal hall should be built exactly in the center of the village. Eliyahu Amitzur, a member of the Third Aliyah, born in 1903, and one of the last founders of Kfar Yehoshua still with us, explained to me that the round design of Nahalal and Kfar Yehoshua gave also expression to a feeling of security to the Jewish settlements in the area. We realized that Kfar Yehoshua was the realization of the Torah of life, and not an antiquated Torah. The real holidays were evidenced by tilling the soil. The festival of Shavuot was there to celebrate the first harvest, and not the festival of the giving of the law." Unquote. These quotes bear witness to the importance Kaufman placed on listening to the aspirations of the people for whom he was building their community. It was typical of his style of planning that was applied throughout his life. This is the design for the garden suburb Beit HaKaram near Jerusalem, planned by Esther's father, Richard Kaufman. Kaufman writes about it in one of his rare publications, Planning of Jewish Settlements in Palestine. The following is an excerpt. A fuller account will be accorded here to the settlement of Beit HaKaram than to the other garden suburbs to the northwest of Jerusalem. The foundations of this settlement are, I think, the best of any suburban settlement I have yet planned for Palestine. This fact affected favorably not only the original plan, but also its execution. The area of Beit HaKaram, comprising approximately 280 dunams, is situated in the northwest of Jerusalem, 1 kilometer off the road to Jaffa, on the way to the Arab village of Ein Keren. It has the typical formation of the Judean mountain region, characterized principally by a hilltop. The characteristic form of the site, with its rising cupola, decides the structure of the settlement. The groups of streets and dwellings commence at the slope and belt the hill in rings, growing narrower and narrower until they culminate in a group of public buildings on the summit. An attempt has been made here to give shape to an idea which originated from the nature of such a settlement in such a mountainous area. The settlement itself and the mountain on which it is situated are to be crowned with a group of monumental buildings which will serve the spiritual needs of the inhabitants. Here you see a concept drawing of Beit HaKaram, giving a three-dimensional perspective view, plus a photograph of what appears to be a clay model of the central buildings of the suburb. Kaufman was able to offer multiple ways to envision the new town. Continuing with a quote from his article, Planning Jewish Settlements in Palestine, extending along both sides of the middle hill are two wadis in the shape of terraces, widening to a deep hollow at the foot. These wadis contain the best of garden soils, the vegetable mold washed up in the course of time by the rocky treeless mountains has been deposited here. They form two natural strips for laying out as parks, their position alone marking them out for the main axis of the rhythmically curving network of roads. The natural terraces have been incorporated into the plan in the simplest manner. The manifold Palestinian plants and tree varieties afford a welcome opportunity for architectural landscape gardening, the borders being lined with tall, dark-trimmed carob trees, employed with inner beds of the delicate light foliage of pepper trees, while somber cypresses tower above them all. The hollow at the lower end of the two green strips in the wadis offers a favorable means for laying out an ideal sports ground. To this hollow, the sole flat point of the whole area, the mountain walls descend in steep terraces, forming a natural amphitheater of rare beauty, which at a relatively low cost can be turned into a sports ground with natural terraced platforms. By a fortunate chance, the longitude axis of this hollow faces south-north, so the players, who only play mornings and afternoons, always have the sun and wind from the side, and never from the front, and will never be against sun and wind." End quote. You can tell from this that Kaufman thought about not only the artistic landscaping of the area, but also its functional use. Not only were the aesthetics that would surround the residents considered, but also their activities, even their sports. Esther was well aware of this aspect of her father's work and wanted to ensure that it be remembered. The largest planning effort in the early career of Esther's father, Richard Kaufman, was the first planning of the Haifa-Acre region around Haifa Bay, done in 1925 and 1926. Kaufman writes about the prospects for its development in his aforementioned article, Planning of Jewish Settlements in Palestine. In it, he identified its salient points as follows. If Jerusalem can be looked upon in advance as the cultural center of Palestine, Haifa may also be regarded as certain to become the industrial and trade center. Her economic and geographical advantages make this assumption appear perfectly justified. Haifa has not only favorable inland communications, she is also the starting point for the mercantile routes to the neighboring countries. The east-west gateway through the south-northerly mountain mass, referred to above, begins at Haifa. Already it is the starting point of the railway line to eastern Syria, the Haran, and Transjordan. The line to Egypt starts from Haifa, as does the line to Acre, now to be extended to Ras el-Nakura for the purpose of connecting up at the Ras el-Nakura with the Syrian line to Aleppo and Beirut, Constantinople, and Europe. Haifa is also the appropriate site for constructing the Palestinian port. The coastline of Palestine runs practically straight in a more or less south-northerly direction all along the Mediterranean shore. At Haifa alone does the Gulf of Haifa-Acre form a natural bay, in itself the greatest asset to building a harbor. The local formation of the ground of Haifa and adjacent regions favors these conditions still further. In the western part of the town and bay, Mount Carmel rises to a height of some 350 meters. In the northeast, an extensive well-watered plain stretches beyond Acre to the mountains of West Galilee. The fact alone that not only the most prevalent but also the purest and coolest breezes blow from the west, i.e. the Mediterranean, marks out the western mountain district as the most suitable residential quarter, while the eastern portion of the plain with its flat expanse offers the best opportunities for traffic and industrial development. With a climate which, due to Mount Carmel's height, is temperate even in summer, a more ideal residence than Mount Carmel can hardly be imagined for Palestine, or for the East generally. And in thus combining mountain and sea air, Mount Carmel has a promising future as a health resort." End quote. It is interesting to see the great future Kaufman had in mind for the Haifa Bay Area. Many years later, he wrote in his article, First Planning of the Haifa-Acre region in the years 1925-26 and its problems today. Kaufman points out the many ways the actual development did not follow his design and consequently is suffering for it. He starts the article by giving great credit to three developers who founded the Haifa Bay Development Company, who also saw the great promise of the area. And it was noted that no regional plan existed for the area and that the existing development was, in his words, quote, most anarchic, unquote. For example, the port of Haifa was planned without consideration of the area surrounding it. The railroad and other transportation lines from the south passed around the Carmel that jutted out into the Mediterranean Sea and split the urban area of Haifa. Kaufman recommended that they come through the eastern edge of the Carmel, with feeder lines into the city, thus preserving the beauty of the Carmel and not disrupting the city. In addition, he saw development on the slopes of Carmel as damaging them and had suggested protecting them as public green areas. You can see that Kaufman's ideals were to make the area more livable for the inhabitants, as well as functional. His vision was broader and more far-reaching than the isolated developments that took place. Notice, next to Kaufman's name at the bottom of the plan, the letters M, T, P, I. This stands for Member Town Planning Institute, a prestigious organization in England. Esther was quick to point out that one gains membership by invitation only. Esther was well aware of her father's talent for incorporating the social and aesthetic needs of the people and wanted to make them known to a wider audience. Those of you who completed watching this video have shared in the endeavor to carry out her wishes.